My name is Akinola Davies Jr. I'm writer and director of My Father's Shadow, which is my debut film. It's going to be out in cinemas in the UK on the 6th of February. Please take your family, please take your friends, please support this small independent film, and message me on Letterboxd, message me on Instagram, let me know what you think. Yeah, My Father's Shadow, 6th of February.
Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Due to its world premiere at the 2025 Cannes Film Festival, the cat's well and truly out the bag on this one, eh?
Yeah, I guess so.
Speak to the story being told in My Father's Shadow, and why you and your co-writer Wale Davis wanted to tell it.
There's a bit of a story to tell prior to it, and basically, Wale's my older brother. We both pursued like creative careers to the horror of our mother, to be honest, in many instances. But what that sort of led us to was telling a story or investigating like our version of masculinity. And the reason why we had to investigate that because we lost our father quite early on. Lost our father. I would have been just under. I would have been 20 months. He would have been about 2-3 years old. So he moved back to Nigeria a while ago and started writing for Nigerian TV, which I only learned this year. And he had a writing partner and a coach. And one of the prompts from his coach was to write a letter to a bereaved friend or family member. So Wale wrote a short film script called My Father's Shadow. And in about 2012 or something like that, he sent me the script completely unprovoked, unprompted. And I read it and probably cried for about half an hour, and then called him and we spoke about why he did that. Fast forward to 2020, we made a short film called Lizard, which did really well in Sundance, won the jury prize, and then we knew we'd probably get an opportunity to make a feature film. And having experienced Lizard in lockdown, not being able to go to film festivals, not being able to engage with any audiences, anything like that, and it having success, but that success completely for me is quantified of being at home at my computer. I wanted to make something that felt like if that situation ever happens again, we want to make something that's for us and very personal, that serves ourselves, serves our family, serves our community, serves Nigeria and the diaspora. So I asked if he would let me make the short film and turn that into a feature. And I guess within that, the film explores themes of like masculinity, father-son relationships, grief, the political context of what happened in Nigeria at the time. And, Wale was fortunate enough to become a father in that period. So I think it has a lot of underlying meaning for him, as well as it has a lot of...
That makes a lot of sense, actually, yeah.
Yeah, underlying meaning for myself. So, yeah, I think, being a Black filmmaker or a filmmaker in general, you never really know how much you're going to be able to make work, whether this would be your only piece of work or whether you get more opportunities. But we said if this is our only opportunity, we want to make sure we just put our hearts and souls into it. And I also think it's quite important for us to be quite familiar with our own material before going out into the world to sort of start investigating other people's material.
So much in there, loaded. I mean, I know it's semi-autobiographical.
Biographical, yeah.
Yeah, I knew I'd mess that up. Don't know why. But speak on why you wanted it to unfold over a single day. Why was that the right time frame?
Sure. I think occurring over a single day made it finite, and also gave it a sense of urgency. I think Lagos, is a place that has so many twists and turns and sort of characters. But I think that the film is the premise of the film is a gift of a day, knowing that day isn't going to last forever. So I think for an audience, like you start in the morning, you're going to end at night. Like that's so you kind of have this subconscious conversation going on in your mind that it's going to the darker it gets, the closer we are to the end of the film. I think also beyond that, the day of the election result was also very sort of like tumultuous and controversial day in sort of Nigerian history. So we sort of realized, okay, we're gonna spend the day with the boys and their father, but if we set it on this day, it means we're also on the clock, Equally, the day being about memory and grief and the father's pursuit of trying to provide for his family. There's just so many layers of what can happen in a day, and I think we didn't really want to, again, coming back to the first question, as sort of filmmakers and first time filmmakers, we think we need to like earn the right to keep the audience watching. And the film being about 98 minutes also meant that we had to be very succinct with what we're doing. So we really wanted to just like pack as much as possible in, keep people entertained, but also just like stick to the themes of what we're doing. And in the theme of the story, all of it happens across a day, and as a means, it just meant it's very self-contained. We don't have to worry too much about costume. We don't have to worry too much about all things that you would have to consider if it was a multiple period of a film. But yeah, I think working within limitations for us is really important. It's pretty much all I've ever done as a filmmaker. So I think even in the story, trying to make things happen in one day just felt like a limitation that we wanted to sort of challenge ourselves to making.
I mean, you kind of addressed this question already, but for me, it was like a coming of age story,
Sure.
exploring like personal memory during the time of national crisis or significance,
Yeah.
if you like. I mean, what would you add to that?
I'd say it's a supernatural drama. I think in the way sort of like black people or indigenous people or people from the global south think of the world is like, we have a lot of urban legend where we're from. We have a lot of mythology where we're from. We have a lot of cultural stories that are more permissible in our culture than maybe in some other cultures. But I think so. All those things are all equally things we're trying to pack into the film. Definitely coming of age. Definitely multi-genre type film, because I think it takes a lot of twists and turns. But I think fundamentally it's a film about two boys trying to get to know their father a little bit better, and in their way trying to sort of hold him accountable for the choices he makes, type of thing.
I thought the time period was anchored well very early, with the two brothers playing and referencing wrestling characters.
Yeah.
So it made me wonder: are you still a big wrestling fan?
You know what? In some ways, yes.
I mean, those are some legends that you're mentioning,
Absolutely.
right? And I could tell it was to maybe appeal to a wider audience so that they understood straight away what time period we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those little bits of information help, because obviously it's set in '93. There's no cell phones and all that kind of stuff, and referencing particular. I mean, the Undertaker seems to live forever, but other characters in there are very specific. But yeah, we were both really big wrestling fans. Probably me more so than my brother. And I think in lieu of like making our first film and trying to tell stories, it was very important for us to like reference things we know and not be ashamed of like things that we were really into as kids and whatever. But equally, funnily enough, the wrestling thing comes back so much from audiences all over the world.
I can imagine, because it immediately grabbed me, and like I said, I thought to myself, and I thought, okay, cool, this is definitely, if you don't know Nigeria, don't know Nigerian history, don't know nothing, you're just sitting and watching this film and just saying to yourself, what mainstream TV programming was I exposed to as a youngster? Most people watched wrestling, right?
Completely.
So most people would have understood three of those characters: Undertaker, Mr. Perfect, and Ultimate Warrior.
But it's funny, there's so many references. If you read the writing and the script, there's so many references that are harder to sort of place because they're just happening really quickly.
Right.
But like growing up in Nigeria, kind of looked to the States. So whatever was happening in the States was whatever was current in the States was, maybe we didn't receive it immediately, but it was never too far from what we were receiving. And I think, I mean, there's a line in there, and again, it's so innocuous that people don't even notice. But even there's like a Bruce Springsteen T-shirt in the film that's written in the story, but it took us ages to get clearances for the wrestlers, for all these like little things
Wow.
to be able to make a film. But those things are really important because actually they're, like you just mentioned, they're a touchstone to people's memory, people's adolescence, their childhood, and I think equally it helps frame. We were the same age as the boys in '93, so it just kind of helps frame our age, helps frame our generation, helps. Someone says the more specific you are, the more global the story is, and I think we had to be. We just leaned into being very specific for sure.
Hulk Hogan didn't sign off then.
Thankfully, not. Yeah,
The character
yeah,
Capo Fola
yeah.
is the father at the center of the film, right? He's estranged from his sons. Yet you didn't turn him into either a hero or a villain. Something a bit more complex than that, a bit more human. Speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you frame it as not him being a hero or villain, because that's something we really debated. I think there is a world in which where we may have thought he should have become more of a hero. I certainly think in the writing process, my brother was very like open to that. But I'm an eternal mother's boy, and I think for me it was very important for it to feel balanced. I think my brother really
Definitely got that.
Yeah, my brother really looked up to the idea of who our father was. Maybe idolized him. Maybe like created this like larger than life heroic character. Whereas I was kind of on the other. I was actually a lot more upset with my father, which is difficult to contextualize considering I never really knew him. And grief works sort of differently. But talking about the character of Fela, we're both, what we can identify with is that we're both men. We're both completely flawed. Even as progressive as we might think we are, we still have a lot of shortcomings. And I think as a community of brothers or external of that, Nigerian men or men in general, black men in general, I think there's still a long way to go to I don't know, reach this idea of perfection, but equally, I don't think that idea of perfection is necessary. I think we should be able to talk about our flaws in an open way, because I think that allows us to humanize each other a lot more. And I think that's what we were trying to get to with Falarian's character. We were trying to create a human who felt like he was complex, who was equally super caring, but equally could be engaging in things that people would frown upon. And I think that's what it means to be human. And I think why we did that was because we didn't feel we saw enough depictions of that in terms of especially like black fathers on screen. We felt that there wasn't enough context as to the absence of black fathers in some instances. There's like the whole like notion of absent black fathers, but some are absent because they're trying to provide for their families, especially in an African context, or in the context that we're aware of. Like, they would either go, or even just a working class context, they would leave where their families are to go and work somewhere else to send that money back home. And I was always trying to break down that's the context where he's not there, and then the nuances to like what he's going through in that situation. So yeah, we sort of chewed the fat a lot, and it was quite hard to get to that point. But I think, there's like a particular scene in the film that my brother was like, I don't know if we want to put this in, like, is it going to ruin everything that we've created? But I really sort of fought and tussled with him, and I was like, I think it's probably the things that you think will turn an audience away as what I think would endear them more to a character, because I think ultimately we've tried to create someone that is flawed, but actually the audience still loves him, like irrespective, because they can empathize with someone being imperfect. And I think had we created a perfect character, it would have been a lot more out of touch, and maybe the film wouldn't resonate as much as it has.
No, I'm glad you offer so much insight into that, because the deliberation between the two is clear in terms of how it plays out. That there's real thought that's gone into presenting the balance and the nuance. So I thought I actually thought, to be honest, I thought it was beautifully crafted.
Thank you so much.
I think the contrast between the curiosity, joy, and growth by the two young boys, the chaos, pressure, and obligation encompassed by the father, all set against the backdrop of a Lagos depicted not just as a setting, but almost as a living force.
Completely.
How did you want the city to feel through the eyes of the children as unrest grows around them?
Fantastically crafted question. I mean, I think, I think where you're from represents a lot of like personality traits, right? And even before that, I think a lot of what Falari has to go through is again a reflection of the city, is a reflection of the hustle and bustle, like the pace, the chaos, how things can be extremely peaceful, but then ignite in a second. And I think those are all things that like self-evident when you go to a place like Lagos. You know, I think it's a very hypnotic city. It's not the most aesthetically beautiful place, but it's, for one, it's very cinematic. It's probably one of the most cinematic places because it's constantly in conflict with each other. You know, I think the infrastructure in Lagos initially was built for like 300,000 people, and now there's 20 million people there. So like it's such a, can be quite an extreme place, but I think at the heart of it, it's like surrounded by nature. So these are all things we wanted to sort of embellish. Like Lagos is a character in the film. It has to be a character because there's just so much going on at every given moment. Me and my brother always used to joke that we would go to other African countries and there's just space, you know, like you go to the Caribbean, there's space. But you go to Lagos, it's like everybody's fighting for every corner, like whether it's insects, whether it's mosquitoes, whether it's people, like every area, every corner is alive. And I think that's what we were trying to communicate with the depiction of Lagos. Like it's sort of like subtle beauty. It's sort of archaic architecture, and in some parts things falling apart. The people and the characters and how they exist in it, and the faces and the sort of everything, and equally just the ebb and flow of the city. You know, like with the whale, or with the guys like sitting down and watching what's going on. It's alive all the time. And as a filmmaker, to have that as a character is incredible, you know. And equally to what I said about Falarian before, it's like we never really seen that Lagos on screen. Like we see like people go and do documentaries. Oh, Lagos is a dangerous place, or but we grew up there, and even though we grew up in quite hostile military dictatorship, like we still grew up there. We still had a childhood there. There's still like a lot of things we're really fond of there. There's still people that live there that are equally fond of it. And obviously, we're not under military dictatorship anymore. But I think as Black people, or Africans in general, or people who live in a state of, or who have lived in a state of constant political turmoil, that like uh, these things happen and then you have to move on. So you don't really get time to just sit and like take in the sort of like mundane everyday things. And I certainly think in the early 90s, that's what Lagos was like. You didn't really have an opportunity to catch your breath. You just had to keep on moving, basically.
You kind of touched on the writing and what influenced you and your brother in quite some detail, but the script telling the story is one thing. Jermaine Edwards, though, cinematography. I mean, let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, man, with pleasure. I think I've been really, really fortunate. I made 3 narratives. Two have been shot by people from the Caribbean. Shabir Krishna from Antigua, and Jermaine, who's from Jamaica but grew up in Nottingham. And I think there's like a short. I say that to say there's a real shorthand with the way we see people, because I think we actually see people. I think there is a duty of care to the subject matter, to what is being captured and how it's being photographed. Not to say other cinematographers won't, but I think when you have a shorthand and an understanding, and you come from a certain community, things that maybe other people take for granted, you hold it in higher esteem. And I would say Jermaine's definitely like an artist in his own right. I think, he's he's like, he's like a really formidable photographer. He's someone who has always been invited to the ball, but never been asked to dance. He went to NFTS. He's by every metric, he's done what he should do to be a successful filmmaker. But for some reason, no one really gave him a chance to sort of photograph his first feature. And I'd been working with him for the best part of a couple of years before my father started shooting documentary stuff about Black life around the UK. And really, it's all just like handheld, mundane. We go in there with no plan. He shoots on film, I shoot digital. So we had been developing a language. And when you look at the rushes, you see how tender he captures sort of Black life. And when it came to it, I'll be honest, I felt a lot of pressure to maybe go in another direction, maybe pick a more established cinematographer from a different community. But
where'd that pressure come from?
Well, I think the pressure comes from loads of different places. People that would surprise you, like people within our community, like being like, "You sure it's the first time?" Because I think people want the film to be a success, and maybe sometimes their idea of success is like a tried and tested method, right? And for me, I'm just like, but if we're always gonna like uphold the status quo, like then of course that would be the tried and tested method. But I'm trying to work with people who have a fresh perspective, as I believe I'm someone who offers a fresher perspective. I haven't reinvented the wheel, but like our communities have existed for a long period of time. But like, when do we get to be the authors? When do we get to be the photographers of what's happening in our communities? And I'm like, if I'm as a director who mentors young Black directors, male and female, who has done an apprenticeship, who like talks about all this stuff. If I am not able to give someone from my community an opportunity, who will? And I think the work shows for itself. Jermaine's first film got into Cannes, won an award at Cannes. Jermaine's second film got into Venice, won an award at Venice. So I think the proof is in the pudding, like I think it's always been there. It just the talent and the work rate and the skills has always been there, but it takes for just a little bit of bravery on all sides for us to pick our own and sort of like say that, yeah, this is the manner in which we're going to plant our flag here and we're going to go through it. But I think just the final thing to say about Jermaine, I think he's his photography is by and large some of the most poetic I've been able to make. And I think it's a real, even though maybe he might have wanted an opportunity earlier, I think it goes to show what perseverance and consistency does, because it made his hunger and his yearning for wanting to create beautiful imagery is what is self-evident in this film, I would say.
100%. And you mentioned bravery, and I think that's what it is.
For sure.
Casting.
Yeah.
God, what was that like?
You know what? It's funny. We're doing this interview here in Southeast because the first place I met Shokwe Dirisu was at Burgess Park.
Oh wow!
Not too far from here.
Local effort.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one of the first places I saw him at the Dunmar doing One Night in Miami years ago. I didn't know his name then because I'm closer. Oh, I was closer with Arinze Kenny, a different actor. And Arinze invited me to Dunmar, and I thought that was one of the best experiences in a theater I'd ever had as a young man. And then I saw Shokbe on the bus, Gangs of London. I saw him in his house as well, but again, didn't really register because I was still so far from making my own film. And then I saw him on a bus here in South, and I was like, oh, this guy looks great. I think he's Nigerian descent. And then we met in Burgess Park, and we had the most natural interaction. And then there was a really awkward situation with a guy who wanted to sit with us, but we're like, sorry, we're having a meeting. And then he came back and he was really hurt. He was like, I'm a Black guy too, you should let me sit with you. And Shokwe just like completely diffused the situation with so much empathy and care. And he sat with us and we continued our meeting. And I was like, you know what? Just that as a man is like what I'm looking for in terms of this character. It's just someone who like has that range, because Shokwe is a big guy, but still chose to lead with empathy. And I was like, okay, cool, I can bring this person to Lagos because those interactions are what Lagos is going to be like. and the fact that he can skillfully navigate that. So once we had Shock Bear, we did a read. Shaheen got him. It was me and him. We did a read together. He was perfect. The boys was always going to be quite a tricky sort of Tetris.
That's what I'm interested in. I'm like, because they were good.
Yeah, no, they were really good. But I went to Lagos maybe like 3 or 4 months before we even started prep. I went to schools. I went to outside of Lagos to schools. We tried to went to like drama classes, like search on the internet for people who were making like content. And I met some kids in like the October. So we shot in the February, but in the October I met some kids. I thought they were really good. I used to have really long dreads to like my lower back, and I'm covered in like tattoos and stuff. But apparently, I thought the kids were interested in what we we're trying to do. They were more interested in my dreads and my tattoos because they don't really see people like that often in Nigeria. But at that point, I was like, okay, it's not going to be impossible. It's going to be hard, but it's not going to be impossible. And then when it came down to a few weeks before prep, we had to do a workshop. So we invited all those kids back, and we needed to fill like 5 more places. So we did self tapes. Within those self tapes, the brothers were in those self tapes, and they had very weird tapes. One of them like flipped his eyelids, and the other one, Godwin, did like angry very well. So we had them come back, and we did a 2-day workshop. I had done a workshop with a brilliant acting coach. Her name is Miss Evelyn Dua. I did that here in London, and we invited her to Nigeria. We also and she kind of worked with the boys, but with the whole team, we had this workshop in Nigeria. Shaheen Beg, our casting director, and Kemi Lala, who also worked with her, and we just did play. We were just playing, leading this workshop, and the 2 boys I'd seen before, I thought they were really good, but they were just not interested. One of them was just not interested anymore. I'd cut my hair and but the 2 boys, we didn't know they were brothers on the first day. They were being very tactile. They were supporting the other kids. And then the next day we found out they were brothers, and the team was like, you have to pick these 2. I was a bit worried because they'd never been in anything before. Their mother is a scriptwriter and an actor, but so they remember the dialogue. And I was like, look, worst comes to worst, they'll remember the dialogue. It's the performance that I'm going to have to figure out. But they just showed a lot of intuition within the workshops. So then we picked them, and then Miss Evelyn Dua worked with them for a while. Then we had a couple of coaches, Toby Clark, who works with a lot of kids on TV, and Andy Wymet came and ensured that the boys kept on learning, even though we were filming the whole time. And really, I was quite stressed with, especially Godwin, the little one, in the first few days. But I just remember my producer telling me they're children, let them be children. And I think after that, we just allowed them to be a lot more free and collaborative. And I think that's what you see in the performances.
Yeah, most definitely. 100%.
Yeah.
No, I thought they were really good.
Thank you.
Keep holding in.
Yeah, we'll do for sure.
Receiving a special mention, right, from the Uncertain Regard jury. What did that moment mean to you?
I mean, in hindsight, it was massive, I mean, I think in the moment I was just too nervous. I was terrified, like it was just very overwhelming. Cannes is very overwhelming, Cannes is very overwhelming. Having a good film in Cannes and a good reaction, again, is doubly overwhelming because like you just do like interviews and all this kind of stuff, and then we left thinking maybe we didn't win anything, which would have been fine, but then got called back, and even that day was none of the team were there in the crew because everyone had left. So again, but I think what that goes to show, more to your question, is that like our stories are important. Us being able to author our stories are important. I think maybe what at least we found, and I can only speak for myself and my brother, is that like allowing our stories to be scrutinized a little bit in terms of people who have experience with filmmaking has allowed us to get the maximum from it. Because maybe had we not allowed that to be scrutinized in terms of just saying like, oh, you're not from our community, we're just going to protect this. Maybe we wouldn't have got the best out of it, because maybe we would have like been a little bit too indulgent in the things we want, as opposed to really allowing the work to, come under pressure and actually like survive that. And I think, going through that process and seeing the results in like Cannes and the other festivals and stuff we've been to has just been another validation, and allowed us to double down in the fact that we want to tell more of our stories and we want to work with more people from our communities, because I think, you know, the outcome has been incredible, but the process was the best experience of my life. I would do it again in a heartbeat with the same people, like all over again. And I'm excited to do that again in a different context. But yeah, I think external validation is great because it allows the film to sit on like an international stage, and hopefully opens more doors for other directors from different backgrounds. Um, but yeah, in the moment it was very, very, very crazy, to be honest.
When the credits roll,
Mm.
what do you hope lingers for viewers when the film's finished?
Sure. I'm normally very, very like. I normally try and avoid answering this question, so I'll do both. I'll give you my avoidant answer and something a little bit more candid. I think so. My avoidant answer, I would say, I want the audience to project whatever they want into the film. I want them to be able to extract whatever they extract, because to me as a director on that side, that's the gift. Those are the conversations I want. But I would probably say my more candid answer is I want people to watch it with an open heart, and maybe consider the level of complexity that like people, our parents and caregivers, had to go through at the times they had to go through particular things. I think every generation thinks they're the first people to experience something, but the reality is like we're not, and the context is always different given the time that existed. And I think, in a Nigerian context, maybe as a younger generation, or from wherever you are, we might be a lot more dismissive of those periods of times, but they were pretty difficult. I think when you've seen a generation have their like hopes and dreams like deflated and sucked out of them so many times, you can understand a little bit why they're a lot less open to wanting to revolt and fight and resist. But I actually think, being able to tell a story and show that context humanizes that generation a little bit more and shows that what they were working with in that period of time. So I would just say, that I hope the film becomes like a watering hole for intergenerational conversation. Maybe that's probably what I would say, and maybe around masculinity, maybe around politics, maybe around family dynamics, maybe around grief, because I think as a community, like we grieve together, and I think all over the world, I feel like Black people grieve together no matter what. And I think maybe even within that grief, we can try and start having the conversations that are more important to us before we get to that point, maybe. Yeah.
Thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. I mean, just whether present or absent, for me, we're all in our father's shadow. So
100%.
Yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, man. Real honor.
Hard work, dedication. Hard work. Dedication. Hard work. Dedication. And that's what we stick